Put your foot down. Woo! All 68 of that horsepower. Yeah. Get it going.
Hello everybody and welcome to JayEmm Friends. Now just in case you haven't noticed, we now have a podcast. It's called The Radiator Arms. You can watch it right here on the JayEmm Friends channel, or if you prefer, listen on Spotify, Apple Music or Amazon. And it features myself, my good buddy Ant, who I'm sure you're familiar with, and a new face to the channel, Will. Now in a recent episode, we talked about supercars, the joys, the disappointments, and the reality versus the fiction. And for that episode, Ant took Will out in his Gallardo Superleggera LP 570-4 Edizione Tecnica to give him his first ever taste of a supercar.
Giddy up! Will he fix? That's the question.
And after that recording, Ant hit us with a bit of a revelation. You see, he is of a very different vintage to us two. And this, the humble Maestro, was in fact a new car when he was a young man. More than that, it was a new car that he actually kinda wanted. And even stranger, now he is a fully grown man with access to nice stuff. There is still a part of him that wants to know exactly what he was missing out on. So today, courtesy of the lovely Will, he and Ant are going out in this lovely Maestro and seeing if it was worth the wait. Enjoy.
This is so cool. Yeah, I've no idea. I've never been in a Maestro before.
Have you never been in a Maestro
my whole life?
Oh, here we go.
Yeah. So now we're on the road in the Maestro with Will at the wheel because I want to find out a bit more about this car, and I thought it would be easier to do that if he was driving and I was thinking about what I wanted to know. As we explained earlier in the intro, this is a car I've actually never been in before. I've never been in a Maestro. These cars have been around since 1982.
I think 83 was the official launch. They were on I believe a Y reg, I think it was.
And then they made them for like 20 years?
Yeah, I think it was about 12, I think, officially in the British Leyland guise. So 83 to about 94 is when they officially stopped. They made a few knockdown kits between 94 and 95. And then obviously it was taken over by the Bulgarian factory and then the Ledbury knockdown kits, which is a whole nother story of post-normal kind of British Leyland production of these vehicles.
And this one is a 1990 1.3 Clubman.
Yes, a 1990 1.3. So this would have been one of the early years of the Clubman specification. And now that differs from the rest of the previous specifications because it's got less tech on it. It's actually got metal bumpers, which I think look kind of cool on this. It gives it that kind of way more, mildly more aggressive and kind of angular style, especially when you mix it up with the lowered suspension and the wheels as well. The reason they did that was because in about 89-90 time, they introduced the R8 based Rover 200 and Rover 400 series. And so the Maestro was then put as the entry level vehicle to get into Rover ownership, basically. It was a mixture of Honda and Rover tech. It was when they were working together, so that platform is quite interesting in itself because you get like Honda engines and things like that in them, all kind of interesting stuff basically. But that's Rover down to a T because this actually has a Volkswagen sourced gearbox, believe it or not.
No way.
It's a lot of components from the Mark II/Mark I Golf, which is what they were using as the development platform for the car.
Another thing is that this is an Austin Maestro, right?
Yes, so there's a bit of a weird one about that. It was all the part to do with when Austin Motors itself kind of closed down and changed over to Rover, and British Leyland closed a load of brands up and I think pretty much just put them under the Rover mark. So in about 89-90, that same kind of time, what I can tell online, is when it went from the Austin Maestro to just simply the Maestro. They removed all the Austin logos from everywhere in the car, and you won't even see a Rover badge on this. It only says Maestro, nothing else, even though on the V5 for this car it actually says it's made by Rover, and most people refer to these later models as the Rover Maestro. Just another kind of weird quirk about them.
Wasn't there an MG Maestro at one point?
There was. Now, they did a few MG versions. If I remember correctly, I think there was a 1.6 MG, and then there was a 2-litre EFI MG, and then there was the MG Turbo. And obviously that was quite, I think it was made by Tickford, the company, which was a tuning company back in the day that was quite popular. And I think they're about 150 horsepower. I'm not 100% sure. But for the time, a front-wheel drive car in the late 80s, 150 horsepower was a good amount, especially in something which isn't heavy.
I actually like the styling on this car. I think that this is one of those designs that was ahead of its time.
Oh, definitely.
When I used to see these cars on the road, in the 80s, because I'm old enough to have been alive in the 80s, I used to really like them. A lot of people slated the car in reviews and driving reviews and everything, although from the passenger seat so far, it feels actually quite cool. I quite like it, by the way, but that's because of some aftermarket coilovers, which we will come back to when we talk a little bit about the ride. But styling wise, I think it was ahead of its time. And I think if you look back at this car and Audis of that time and after, I actually think this has got a kind of almost Audi-esque vibe going on, with the sort of shape of the headlights, the roundness to it, but with the sharper edges, even though I think this was made long before that particular design came out with the Audi.
Was it the Audi 80s and stuff like that? And the ones around there, they had that. I think they were like 80s, early 90s. They had that kind of squared off look to the front of them, kind of rectangle headlights and stuff like that as well.
I actually have goosebumps being in this car. Not because of you, Will, don't worry.
Well, what can I say? I have that effect on people.
There's no special conversation we have to have with your wife right now. It's because of this car, right? Now, I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, which some of you may or may not know, and these were cars that were on the road from when I was aged 11. You can do the maths. And it just reminds me, just even the smell, even the tactility, the build quality just reminds me of that period in my life when I was sort of growing up as a young man, before I was even a teenager. And I saw these cars on the road for years afterwards, right the way up to, I'd say, the late 90s, pretty much. That's when they started to disappear.
This is the thing. I also remember these being around everywhere when I grew up, because I was born in 91. So on my street, there was Metros, Maestros, Montegos. But because of the way they corroded, really, they just all disappeared. And the last time I looked, there was only about 200 to 300 Maestros actually taxed, and probably about the same half on Sawn. So there's really not a lot of them left.
Now, it's kind of sad that there's very few of these left, but at the same time, that makes this car even cooler, in my opinion. I mean, if you go to a car meet, how many other Maestros are you going to see?
You're just not. And the thing is, this gets a lot of stares, a lot of looks, a lot of waves. I only yesterday was going to the supermarket in this, and somebody came up and said, I had one of those in the 80s. That was an amazing car. I just haven't seen one in years. I love the fact you've got it. Keep it good, look after it. I just love the fact it's there. And, it's one of those cars where, even though in many regards it's a bit of rare and nobody really cares for the most part, to a certain group of people, they just go mad for them. And I kind of enjoy having it out and keeping it going, because it's just nice, all the conversations it sparks up. And every time I speak to someone about the car, they're always so enthusiastic and say they were so much better than people said they were. And I have to agree with them. I feel it's very quintessentially 80s in here, and I think a lot of the other cars from back in the day probably would have been just as good or on par in the way they actually drove.
I think a lot of the opinions about this car were actually because somebody that people respected said it was not a good car in the press, and then everyone said, oh no, they're terrible cars, just to be kind of part of the crowd. They didn't want to be the odd one out. And I talk a little bit about this in a recent video over on Sports and Touring about the single clutch gearbox, where I think it gets a way worse rap than it deserves. People just haven't even driven the cars and criticise it because that was the thing to do. Anyway, back to the Maestro. Now, one of the things that you warned me about before I got in this car was the suspension being a little bit on the stiffer side.
The stiffer side, especially at the rear.
Now, you went out in my Gallardo last week with me.
Yes.
I actually think that's stiffer than this.
It probably is, actually.
Yeah, this doesn't feel that bad.
No, it's not too bad, though. It's not great for what it is. The reason being is because this is something that was quite common that a lot of people probably out there already know of. You use Volkswagen Polo 6N coilovers, and they fit so many different cars of the kind of the 80s and 90s era, because they all had a very similar kind of suspension mounting setup. The downside with that is to get this at a level height, the fronts are raised all the way up and the rears are essentially all the way down, which means the suspension travel at the back is not brilliant, and the fronts are a lot more softer because they're not having to compress as much as the back, so it can make a little bit of a difference in the ride.
Yeah, but do you know what? It's not that bad. It's a little bit crashy on this bumpy road, but for the sake of how it looks, I think it's worth it, because I think this looks really cool at the ride height it's at.
Oh, 100%. It's also on a set of MGF 15-inch wheels, which came from the little Roadster that they did back in the late 90s, early 2000s. I actually bought them painted like this with the black inserts and the silver outside, and I saw them and I thought, you know what, with all the black lines and all the stuff on this car that it has and all the stickers, that's going to look great. They do need refurbishing though, that is the only thing, so I need to save up a bit of money to refurbish that, and I really would like to get some of the gas coilovers that are made for this car, because they're the only company which actually make coilovers for it.
Oh, wow.
But they're about 800 quid to a grand, so I've got a little bit of saving to do before I can do that, but then they'll be fully damping adjustable and they'll make it ride really nicely.
Talked about its engine size, 1.3, and since it's a 1990s car, that 1.3 litre probably isn't making a huge amount of power.
No, it's making roughly 68 horsepower and I think just over 100 newton meters of torque. It's not a lot, to be honest, and as you can tell when you're in here, it's not quick. But the thing is though, it's still more than enough because of the weight of the car to actually get it up to speed. I mean, we're doing 50 now with no real problem, with a couple of grown men in it, and it's fine.
I mean, how much would this weigh? What, 1,100 kilos? 1,200?
I don't even think it's that much. I don't know off the top of my head, but let's put it like that. There's not a lot of crash safety instructors. There's no airbags. There's no kind of door reinforcements and things like that. Though I believe this was one of the first cars to get a laminated windscreen, which is a fun fact. This was a car that was actually given to me by a chap whose father had sadly passed away and bought the car from new. So he bought it in brand new in 1990. Wow, look at that!
Oh, wow.
That's a bit of beauty. Sorry, distracted there.
Yeah.
So the chap bought the car brand new in 1990 and he drove it up until 2003 when he stopped driving. But because he was an older gentleman, he did that kind of typical thing of loving and cherishing the car. And I've got every single receipt ever done for the car, including bulbs, wiper blades, batteries, tyres, everything, all done from the main dealer, which was Kerridge's in Needham Market. So it's quite amazing to think about. It's also only had 40,000 miles on the clock when I got it. I pulled this out of a barn at the end of 2022 where it had been sat for 19 years after the guy had given up driving. And basically I went through and I fully recommissioned it. We're talking a new fuel tank, brake calipers, what other bits and bobs. I went through all the brake hoses, loads of coolant stuff, serviced the gearbox. There's far too much stuff to recall. Basically, I completely went through the whole car, and a lot of the parts I got from it were actually used from my original Apple 2000 Maestro, which was the parts car, you see.
That's handy.
Yes, well, as I said, it was the corrosion that unfortunately got to it, and because it had been very well used, that car, it hadn't fared well. It had been out in a lot of winters. Now, what I believe had saved this one and made sure it was in such good condition is that the original owner had chosen to have it fully wax coated and undersealed, everything underneath. So actually, apart from the little bits on top, underneath is so solid, it only ended up requiring a couple of small patches of welding to make it roadworthy again.
Now I think it's about time I had a chance to have a go at this car and maybe I can see for myself if I think it's any good.
Let's do a seat swap. So one thing you'll need to know is getting it in first gear is, because there are push downs going to reverse, you kind of have to be careful that you don't accidentally put it into reverse because the linkage is a little bit.
Is that first or third?
You'll feel that's first.
Right, okay, just good. I don't want to put it into race mode. Ooh, interesting. So the pedals are quite offset as well.
Yeah, they are, and you have to kind of be very kind of careful because it's a cable clutch. It can be a little bit unforgiving sometimes.
All right.
So it's not like the modern cars where it's all damped and you've got a dual mass flywheel which will take away all the revs and stuff.
Where is the clutch? Oh, blimey, it's really high, isn't it? There we go.
Yeah, but it doesn't slip though. It's not actually worn. Oh. Yeah, there you go.
It's because, you know, it's so high up.
Yeah.
I'm not used to the clutch being that high.
And it's not because it's slipping, and it's not because it's worn either. It's just how they were. James, I think, had a similar problem when he drove my Apple car, and he said, oh, it's right by the top. I think that clutch is slipping. And when I got back in the car and I saw the review, I was like, no, it's not. It's just kind of how they are.
I think I might have to mention to William that a clutch could need to go on his resto list. Up the hill there, the revs began to rise, but the speed did not. Truth be told, you do need to work this car reasonably hard if you want to keep up with modern day traffic.
Yeah. What you'll notice about this as well is this car has no power steering, but to compensate for that, you have to put quite a hilarious amount of lock-in to get it to go around the corners sometimes.
It doesn't feel like a car that doesn't have power steering.
Yeah.
Maybe I have to manoeuvre it when it's stationary.
When you've got more stationary manoeuvring, you'll feel kind of a lot more of that. The one thing I found about the steering, and you'll probably agree, is that it's a little bit woolly on centre.
Yeah.
But when you actually put it into the corner, you'll find that it weights up quite nicely, and you actually get a kind of a lot of feedback of what's going on through the wheel.
Okay, I think I found where the clutch is now.
Yeah.
Oh, do you know what? Corners nicely.
It's not bad. It's not bad. And that has no front anti-roll bar either. That is all the lowered suspension doing that.
Really?
No front anti-roll bar whatsoever.
Not quite. Nearly got it. Oh, man. Honestly, I can't tell you how much this is a buzz for me to drive this car, because I don't ever seen pictures of its interior. I always thought the dashboard looked, for its time, quite high tech. And doesn't it have some interesting features as well?
So what I actually ended up doing to this particular one was I added a rev counter to it. It didn't come with a rev counter initially, and I got a set of instrument clusters on eBay that had a rev counter, and I actually mixed them together. So you'll look at one side, notice it's got more angular lines and 80s styling on the right with yellow needles, but the ones on the left are from the later 90s dashboards.
Oh yeah, but so I didn't notice the line between the two is actually really well done.
Yeah, it is. It's because you've got the little bit there, and I think it breaks up, and it's quite interesting in that regard. Interior-wise, modification-wise, I haven't really done anything other than add a couple of cup holders.
Yeah, I saw that.
And a Pioneer radio, and it's got a £5 subwoofer which I bought at Cash Converters, and it had the amp as well. I walked in there one day and saw that, and I was like, how much is that? They said, we have no idea if it works. You can have it for £5, and it works, which is great. It's not brilliant, but it's kind of it's an old Sony Explode, so it's very much of the 80s and 90s era, so it fits right in with the car. Other than that, one of the other things I like about this is it's got the red accents on the door cards and on around the seats as well, the piping. So if you look at it, it matches the kind of the paintwork, and it's yet again that kind of checkered 80s, 90s style pattern as well. So the interior, while it needs a new headliner because it is a bit flappy at the back, actually is quite cool.
One of the things that I think is really important about any car is whether it makes you smile. And I don't know if you've noticed, I've been smiling as soon as I got behind the wheel of this.
Yeah.
It is so cool. I love it. And I think the slightly mildly crashy suspension that you currently have, I think it gives it a bit of character.
It does add a bit of fun to it, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, obviously the new ones will be slightly better damped once you get them, and, you know, mate, I'm smiling.
How are you enjoying the furiously powered 68 horsepower through that single HIF 44 carburettor. And may I say as well, notice how well it runs.
It does. Honestly, it's very, very smooth. I mean, you've obviously put a lot of work into... Where's the clutch? There it is.
There you go. You see, when you get used to it, you actually realise, oh, it's actually really, really easy to operate. And you don't really slip it that often.
Now that we're on a slightly quicker road and I'm getting to experience the steering, I see what you mean. It does have a little bit of a sort of dead space in the middle.
Yes.
And it kind of reminds me of those old movies where you see people like doing that with the steering wheel, but nothing is happening. They're still going in a straight line. But you get into a corner, particularly a tighter one, and you do then start to feel it weighting up as you go around. But look, this car is not meant to be, a sports car.
No.
This is meant to be a labour of love. This is meant to be a car that you can have nostalgia with and look back on, your youth. In your case, seeing these on the road when you were very young, and in my case, seeing these on the road, well, right the way up until I was about 18. Well, actually, longer than that. Until I was quite a bit older. But, this is an experience. The finish on the dash, the square shapes, so 1980s. The finish on the door here, the sort of, I'd call it, I don't know, 1970s sofa material.
Which is quite comfy, actually.
It is.
Yeah.
And everything about it is just putting a smile on my face.
The thing about this car is every time you get into it, it's not like driving a modern car. It's got an experience of its own. Everything is kind of a little bit of an occasion because it is so different to what many people who daily drive, even 10-year-old cars, will be used to. So I saw you going for fifth there, and a fifth that doesn't exist. Case in point, you've got the no power steering. It's got brakes, which are okay, but they're no ABS, not fully modern assisted. And I'll tell you what, for an old car, because it's so light, like you're doing now, you can actually chuck it into a corner and it gives you quite a good amount of confidence, doesn't it?
It does. I'm actually getting a lot of confidence in it right now, as you can tell.
Yeah.
I mean, we're pretty much doing close to 60 miles an hour.
And that is also something about a car which isn't fast. You can drive a car with on 10/10ths all of the time, be doing 60 miles an hour, and you're just, or up to that, and you're still having a blast.
Absolutely. Well, as the saying goes, it's more fun to drive a slow car fast
Absolutely.
than a fast car slow.
Absolutely.
But look, let's talk about a couple of things that I'm experiencing in this car right now.
Yes.
So the first thing is, it's really weird having only 4 forward gears. Did these ever come with a 5-speed?
They did come with a 5-speed. On the Clubman spec, as far as I'm aware, it was optional to have a 5-speed, but other vehicles did come with them. And my last car did have a 5-speed gearbox. And I have saved the gearbox, I have saved all the linkages, and I've saved everything to convert it to a 5-speed gearbox.
Oh, wow.
Which is something I'm planning to do. And do you want to know one of the reasons I want to convert it to a 5-speed gearbox?
Go on.
Because that will mean I'll be able to put a Volkswagen engine into it.
Oh, that is going to be cool. What engine are you thinking?
So, I have got a good relationship with a couple of people who have been brilliant to me with helping me out with parts of my Golf. The VW Chop Shop in Ipswich, and Stuart from Wired Vag, who is a custom wiring harness maker and tuner for Volkswagen platforms. And when we've looked at it, we've realised that a more modern 5-speed will have the same gearbox mount as this and will go on. The drive shafts will line up and go on. I can make the speedo cable from that go into the newer gearboxes, and all I have to do is get an off-the-shelf Mark II Golf platform hydraulic to cable clutch conversion, and I'll have everything I need for the main drivetrain, including one of the actual full gearbox mounts. So I only need to fabricate a stabilisation bar and an engine mount for the other side. And with the help of those guys, we'll be able to source the parts. Stuart will be able to actually make a custom standalone wiring harness, and we'll be able to put into here, I hope you're ready for this, either a 1.8T or the 2.3 litre 5-cylinder engines.
Mate, that's going to be bonkers.
The 2.3 litre 5-cylinder engines, the earlier ones, are cable throttle as well, so I won't need to swap anything like that over. I won't have to worry about putting in an electronic pedal. They can run the ECU standalone, And all we'd have to really do is make an exhaust, and all the Mark IV cooling system stuff is very similar to this. So actually I'd probably be able to do a whole entire Mark IV Golf cooling system conversion.
Mate, that's going to be epic. I actually can't wait to see that. In fact, if you want to see that, make sure that you subscribe to Will the Plank over on his main channel, and I'm sure a lot of the build of that will be featured there. And of course, we will bring you the highlights to that on this channel. So if you haven't subscribed here yet, well, what have you been doing all this time?
Exactly.
Now, you did warn me that the gearbox is a little bit on the sloppy side, just because of the linkages being a bit old and the like. When you do your upgrade, that is going to tighten it up.
Oh, absolutely, because that'll go through to a set of linkages that have already had all the bushes and everything repaired. There'll still be like rod linkages from a car where all the linkages were absolutely solid and everything was perfect. But speaking of general upgrades and maintenance, the car itself does need a little bit of love. Cosmetically, it's got a few little issues where it needs some paintwork touched up to stop any rust forming. It's going to need a new exhaust system as well, because it's an old mild steel one and it's started to rot out in places. Generally I need to give it a bit more of an under seal and a clean up, which is kind of the plan for this year. I don't think I'm going to be able to afford to do the coilovers this year, so I'm hoping I can at the very least have an exhaust system made up for it and just have the last little bits of paintwork done to make sure that the car stays rot free, because this car is amazingly rust free, like unbelievable underneath for an old Maestro.
I mean, this just goes to show that if you look after a car, it can last, well, literally a lifetime.
Well, this is it. This is exactly what I said to the son of the chap of the original owner when he was talking about what to do with it. One of the reasons he gave it to me, because I was saying, look, either if this car isn't too far gone, I will put this back on the road, I will get this up and going, I'll restore it, and I will enjoy it. And if it is too far gone, I'll make sure that all the parts go to cars or people that desperately need it to keep them going. And he was very happy with that. And yeah, it was just really lucky that the guy was, you know, really liked the cause of what I was going to do with his dad's old car. And that is why I've named it Fred, because his dad's name was Frederick.
That's
so
nice.
We've got Fred the Maestro.
So let's consider this little video a tribute to Frederick.
Absolutely. I'd love to think if he could watch this now, or he could see the car, he may or may not agree with all the modifications, but I'm sure he'd be happy with the fact it's being so looked after and loved. Here's the question I have to you, and I think it's one you can close the video on to. If you had the space and you could find a good example, would you have one?
After this experience, yes, I would.
There we go.
100%. And on that bombshell, that's where we're going to leave it. Make sure you check us out on the Radiator Arms, our podcast here on JayEmm Friends, where Will, myself and James will spend a good hour or so talking about cool and interesting car stuff. Make sure you check out Will over on Will the Plank for various cool and interesting things, from building and restoring cars through to
computers and technology and things like that.
And even the occasional bit of music.
Oh yes.
And of course, check out JayEmm on Cars, and let's face it, if you're watching this, you probably came from there. And if you didn't, well, you should check them out too. And of course, there's me, Ant from Sports and Touring. All the links will be in the description. And since we've just got a couple of bends left, I'd like to just give this a little bit of a drive.
Go on, put your foot down. Woo! Get on, all 68 of that horsepower, get it going.